how to make the avoidant anxious without saying a word. Let's be real. We've all been there. You're giving, you're showing up, you're opening your heart, and they're running, dodging intimacy, shrinking away from connection like it's fire. And you know what? It's exhausting trying to chase someone who's made avoiding you their full-time job. But what if I told you this? You don't need to chase, you don't need to beg, and you don't need to speak a single word, because power doesn't come from talking, power comes from presence. If you want to flip the script and make the avoidant feel the space they tried to create, you don't need manipulation, you need mastery, emotional mastery, energetic mastery, self-mastery. Here's the truth. The avoidant is drawn to your presence, but overwhelmed by your needs. So what happens when you stop needing and start being? What happens when your energy becomes grounded, sovereign, and so self-contained that they can't help but feel the shift? They notice and they feel it. Your silence becomes louder than words. Your detachment becomes magnetic. Your peace becomes their tension. Suddenly, they're checking their phone more. They're wondering where your energy went. They're feeling something unfamiliar. Is it fear? Is it longing? No, it's you. You've become the mirror to their behavior. You've become the lesson they didn't want but absolutely needed. And here's the kicker. You're not doing this for them. You're doing it for you. You are the source. You are the gravity. You are the one who gets to choose who enters your space and who gets to stay. So don't scream, don't chase, don't over-explain. Stay still, breathe deep, walk like you know your worth, because nothing makes the avoidant more anxious than realizing they no longer have power over your peace. Energy doesn't lie. That might sound abstract, even mystical, but when you really tune into your own experience, you already know it's true. Think about the last time you walked into a room where two people had just had a fight, even if they were smiling and pretending nothing happened. You felt it, didn't you? The air was thick, the tension sat heavy, no words were spoken, but the energy told the story. That's because at a deep level, we are constantly reading each other's energetic signals, even if we're not conscious of it. And this is where your power lies, especially in relationships where someone like an avoidant is pulling back. When you're emotionally chasing, someone who avoids intimacy, even if you don't say a word, they feel it. Not because you said, I miss you, not because you double texted, but because your energy is reaching out toward them like a hook, trying to pull them closer. That invisible pressure, they feel it, and the more they feel it, the more they back away. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your energy is giving off the vibration of lack, of need, of pursuit, and the avoidant nervous system, which is wired to see closeness as a threat, senses it like radar. Their guard goes up, they create distance, they protect their space. But the beauty of energy is it can shift. It's not fixed. And the moment you stop reaching, the moment you redirect your focus inward instead of outward, they feel that too. Suddenly, the thread that was pulling on them is cut. The air clears. You're no longer energetically leaning forward. You're standing upright, grounded, maybe even leaning back. You're in your body, you're in your breath. You're not chasing, not even in thought. And now the avoidant, who's been so busy running, starts to feel the absence of that invisible pressure. And that absence doesn't feel like relief. It feels like something's off, something's missing. What happened to the person who was always emotionally available, always there, always sending energy their way, making it easy for them to take space without ever having to feel the weight of losing you? Now, without you reaching, they're left alone with their own thoughts, their own doubts, their own discomfort. You didn't do anything. You didn't speak. You didn't push. You just shifted your energy, and that's why energy is louder than words, because it bypasses logic and hits straight at the emotional body. It's felt before it's understood. They may not even be able to explain why they're suddenly checking your social media more or feeling uneasy or wondering what changed, but they feel it and it's powerful. What makes this even more effective is when your energetic shift is authentic, not a performance, not pretending to be detached while secretly obsessing, but a real return to self, a true reclaiming of your energy, your time, your emotional bandwidth. When you start to pour into yourself instead of pouring out toward them, you light up in a different way. You vibrate higher. Again, even without a word, they feel that shift because energy communicates intention. Think of two people sitting in silence. One is sitting in resentment, fuming inside. The other is sitting in calm peace. From the outside, they both look quiet, but anyone who walks into the room will feel which energy is present. That's how sensitive we are to the emotional field. So if you're around someone who's avoidant and you want them to feel the shift, it begins with you taking your power back, not by confrontation, but by subtle transformation. You start to show up differently, not with more effort, but with less need, less pull, more presence. That presence, calm, grounded, magnetic, is what speaks louder than any message you can send or any conversation you can initiate. It says, I'm not waiting for you. I'm not needing you. I'm here, whole, and I've got me. That vibration does something to the avoidant mind that throws them off the pattern. They're used to feeling pressure and retreating. Now there's no pressure. Now the silence echoes. And in that echo, they begin to feel something new, a kind of anxiety, a kind of curiosity. Why aren't they reaching out? What changed? That's when the dynamic begins to flip, not because you tried to make them feel anything, but because you stopped trying to control it altogether. You aligned your energy, you stopped giving and started being. And when you hold that energy, not just for a moment, but consistently, they start to feel what you were feeling all along. And all you did was let your energy speak for you. When you stop trying to make someone feel something and start being fully present in yourself, everything changed. You move from trying to control the outcome to simply existing in your truth. There's deep power in that. Most people don't understand presence. They confuse it with passivity or silence. But real presence isn't quiet. It's commanding. It's the unshakable vibe of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need external validation to feel complete. And when you're in that space, you don't have to pressure anyone into showing up. Your energy already does the work. When you're constantly reaching, explaining, over-communicating, or trying to bridge the emotional gap for someone else, especially someone who is avoidant, what you're actually doing is giving away your power. You're signaling on a subconscious level that you don't trust your own value enough to just be, that you feel you have to earn love, remind them to stay, convince them you're worth it. That energy can feel desperate even if you think you're being caring or attentive. And avoidance, they pick up on that immediately. It makes them feel cornered, like they have to escape before they lose their autonomy. But when you shift out of performance and into presence, the game changes completely. You stop trying to change them. You stop trying to create connection where none is flowing naturally. You stop managing the emotional dynamic. And in that stillness, where you're no longer efforting, they feel something far more impactful than pressure, the absence of it. Because pressure pushes people away. Presence, on the other hand, invites them in. It doesn't demand, it doesn't chase, it doesn't force. It simply is, and in that isness, there's power, there's calm, there's confidence. People can't connect with you authentically if your energy is constantly tugging on them. And that tug can show up in so many ways, through constant checking in, emotional reactivity, or over-explaining your intentions. But none of that leads to real intimacy. Real connection comes when you're able to be fully in your body in the moment, trusting that you are enough without needing anything in return. That's what presence looks like. Think about the people you felt most drawn to in your life, not because of what they did or said, but because of how they made you feel. Chances are they had a groundedness to them. They didn't try to convince you of anything. They were just there, fully in their skin, fully in their energy. That's what you remember. That's what lingers. That's the frequency you feel long after the conversation ends. Presence is magnetic because it creates space, and space is where the other person gets to choose you freely. Not from pressure, not from obligation, not from guilt, but from a genuine internal pull. That's the only kind of connection that lasts anyway, one that's chosen, not forced. So when you stop pressuring and start embodying your own energy, the avoidant feels it, not because you told them you're done chasing, but because you actually are. Your body, your vibe, your responses, they all align. You're no longer anticipating their next move. You're not bracing yourself for the push-pull. You're just there, breathing, focused on your own energy. And that's when they feel the shift. That shift is powerful because it disrupts the dynamic they're used to. They're used to being pursued, being emotionally fed without having to ask. But now the energy is neutral. Now they have to come toward you. Now the space is open. Instead of feeling pressured, they feel curiosity. They start to wonder what's changed. They feel the lack of expectation, and it unsettles them in a way that makes them pay attention. And what's most important is that this isn't about playing games. You're not pretending to be detached. You're not withdrawing love. You're simply no longer using your energy to try and control someone else's behavior. You're focused on you. You're in alignment with your value. You're choosing presence over pressure because presence doesn't ask for anything. It offers everything without needing to hold on. And ironically, that's what makes people want to come closer. That's what stirs something real in them. Not the words, not the effort, just the quiet, grounded truth of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need to prove it. Neediness is one of the most magnetic forces in the wrong direction. It may seem like you're showing care or love, but in reality, it sends a message that undermines your own value. When you are emotionally needy, it's not that you don't deserve love or connection, it's that you're giving off a vibration that communicates, I don't have enough within myself. It's a call for validation, but it's wrapped in the wrong energy. It's not confidence, it's insecurity, it's dependence rather than interdependence. The moment that need becomes the center of your energy, people begin to feel it, and those who are emotionally avoidant are particularly sensitive to it. The reaction is often to retreat even more. Neediness can show up in many ways. It can be in the constant reaching out for reassurance, always wanting to know where they stand, needing them to tell you that everything is okay. It's the way your emotional well-being is tied to their responses, their affection, or their presence. The more you lean on them for your sense of security, the more it creates a power imbalance, and that's when things start to break down. On the other hand, power is magnetic because it signals that you are whole without the other person. It doesn't mean you're indifferent, cold, or uncaring. It simply means that you are grounded in your own sense of self, so you don't need someone else to complete you. You're already complete. When you stop trying to get something from someone else, your energy shifts from need to fullness. You no longer seek their validation, and because of that, they start to feel the absence of that pull, that constant emotional neediness. They feel your power in the space you hold. When you no longer need them, your energy shifts. You stop making them the center of your world. You stop seeking constant confirmation or approval from them. Instead, you begin to pour your energy into yourself. You stop texting them when you're uncertain. Stop asking for reassurance when you're feeling insecure. You become more self-reliant. That shift doesn't just benefit you. It changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. The avoidant who once felt overwhelmed by your needs suddenly feels the change. They notice that you're not anxiously checking your phone for their message, not emotionally responding to every word they say. They feel less pressure to provide you with constant affirmation. And the strange thing is, this absence of need actually creates space for them to reconsider. The more you release your emotional dependence, the more you become the source of your own validation. It's no longer about whether they choose you, it's about whether you choose yourself. The more you value your own worth, the less you seek validation externally. You realize that you don't need to chase them for love, attention, or approval. The love you give yourself is enough. And when that happens, everything shifts. The avoidant who once felt suffocated by your emotional need now feels a freedom they didn't expect. Their anxiety decreases because they no longer feel the weight of being responsible for your happiness. The less you need them, the more you attract them. But it's not about attraction in the way you think. It's not manipulation. It's simply the way energy works. When you give off the energy of wholeness, people are drawn to that. They are drawn to the person who is centered, who is at peace with themselves. It's a powerful force that doesn't require any action, just a shift in how you show up. This shift also helps you set healthier boundaries. When you no longer need someone to behave in a certain way, you're no longer as affected by their actions. Your emotional state isn't tied to their behavior. You create space for them to make their own decisions, free from the pressure of your neediness. And because of this, your interactions are no longer clouded by the need for approval or attention. They become more authentic based on mutual respect and connection rather than emotional dependence. This transformation in energy has the potential to disrupt old patterns and create a new space for the relationship to grow, but also serves as a vital reminder of something even more important: the power of self-worth. By releasing the need for external validation, you step into your own power, and that power is magnetic because it is not dependent on anyone else. You stop seeking others to give you what you should already be giving yourself: recognition, love, value. When you stop seeking, you make space for people to choose you freely based on who you are, not based on how much you need them to choose you. The energy shift from need to power isn't something that's achieved overnight. It's a journey of self-discovery, healing, and growth. It's the process of realizing that you are worthy of love, not because of anything you can prove, but because you exist. The more you live from that place of knowing, the less you will ever need from anyone. The more you embody that energy, the more people will want to be around you, drawn to the strength and wholeness that you emanate. This is the power of self-sufficiency, the ability to stand in your own energy without relying on someone else's approval to feel complete. This is what makes you magnetic, not neediness, not desperation, but the quiet, confident certainty that you are whole just as you are. Silence can be a powerful force, even more so than any word or action you might take. Often people feel the need to speak, explain, or justify themselves when they're in uncertain emotional spaces. But there's a deeper strength in holding your silence, especially in situations where you feel the urge to react. This kind of silence isn't about withdrawing or shutting down. It's about choosing not to engage in ways that feed into emotional turbulence. Instead, it's a conscious decision to let your presence do the talking. When it comes to relationships, particularly with someone who is avoidant, silence can become an undeniable statement. Avoidants are often triggered by emotional pressure, whether it's verbal, physical, or energetic. They sense the subtle attempts to control or sway their feelings, even if no words are spoken. And when you stop chasing, stop explaining yourself, stop trying to talk things through, you release the tension that they might otherwise feel from being cornered into closeness. Silence doesn't mean that nothing is happening, though. In fact, is one of the most communicative actions you can take. When you withdraw from the constant need to be in contact, to constantly reassure them, you're actually sending a message far louder than words could ever do. You're telling them that you are complete without them. You're showing them that their attention isn't necessary for you to feel whole. This kind of non-reactive silence speaks volumes to an avoidant because it's unfamiliar. It shakes up their default mode of distancing themselves. When they don't hear from you as often, or you don't fill the space with words or actions, they feel the void, and in that void, they are forced to confront something they've been avoiding. Their own feelings, their own uncertainty about the relationship. For many avoidants, their strategy is to maintain distance, to keep from being overwhelmed. They get anxious when they feel their boundaries being pushed, and any hint of emotional need often triggers that flight response. But silence creates a different dynamic. It's not a game. It's not manipulation. It's just a return to self-respect and emotional autonomy. It's a decision to stop reacting from a place of anxiety or urgency and instead to simply exist without needing to fill the silence. And that's when the avoidant starts to question what's changed. What silence does is make them examine their own behavior. When you're constantly emotionally available, they might take your attention for granted. They might feel like they can come and go as they please, knowing you'll always be there. But silence interrupts that pattern. It interrupts the cycle of emotional push-pull. It forces them to feel the discomfort of not being able to control the flow of the relationship. And that discomfort isn't something they're used to, especially if they've been accustomed to the constant validation and reassurance you gave. Now they have to sit with their own emotions. They have to acknowledge the space you've created. In that moment, they might realize they miss you, or they might realize something about their own fears or reluctance to engage. Ultimately, silence creates room for them to choose. It removes the pressure, the sense of urgency. It doesn't demand action or response. It simply lets things unfold naturally. And that's where real connection begins, not from the constant verbal engagement or effort, but from the quiet strength of allowing things to breathe. The beauty of silence is that it allows the other person to come to their own conclusions, free from manipulation or influence. It creates space for them to examine their feelings and choose from a place of clarity, not desperation. This is the power that comes from holding your peace. It's the power to let your energy speak for you without the need for words. When you stop chasing someone, you create a shift in the entire dynamic of the relationship. The moment you stop seeking validation from someone else, especially an avoidant person, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The avoidant, who is often used to retreating or withdrawing from emotional intensity, suddenly feels the absence of your emotional pursuit. And in that absence, they feel something new: curiosity, discomfort, or even anxiety. It's not that you've done anything overtly dramatic. It's not that you've suddenly changed your behavior to manipulate them. Instead, is that you've created space, and that space forces them to confront something they've been avoiding, their own feelings. You see, the avoidant's default reaction to emotional pressure is to pull away. They find comfort in keeping their distance, often because they associate closeness with vulnerability or loss of control. When someone is constantly chasing them or reaching out, it feeds their desire to maintain emotional space. The more you give, the more they pull back. It's a predictable cycle, but one that changes when you stop feeding into it. Now, when you stop chasing, something different happens. The avoidant feels that absence. They feel the shift in energy, the sudden lack of emotional push. And what do? They may start checking in more, or they might begin wondering what happened. They begin to feel the void you've left and start questioning it. It's not that they suddenly crave your attention. It's more that they are conditioned to seek emotional validation and reassurance. And when you stop providing it, it stirs something unfamiliar in them. It disrupts their normal patterns, and now they're the ones with questions, unease, and perhaps even a sense of longing. This shift is incredibly powerful because it creates an emotional dissonance for the avoidant. They no longer know how to respond to you in the same way. They can't retreat to their old ways of pulling away because you're no longer giving them the emotional fuel they once relied on. They start to question their own emotional state. Why aren't they reaching out anymore? What's different? What does this mean about us? And in that questioning, they feel the anxiety of not knowing where they stand. For the first time in the dynamic, they are no longer in control. The emotional space has shifted, and it forces them to consider their own actions and feelings. It's important to recognize that this shift doesn't mean you've manipulated them or even played a game. This isn't about creating false tension. This is about creating genuine emotional space. It's about stepping back, choosing not to engage in the emotional drama and letting the relationship evolve naturally. When you stop chasing, you're choosing to honor your own energy, your own needs, and your own peace. You're no longer trying to make them feel something or rush them into emotional clarity. You're simply letting things be, and in that quietness, the dynamic begins to unravel and reveal itself. By creating this space, you give the avoidant room to reflect, to sit with their feelings, and to make decisions from a place of clarity, not pressure. They are no longer reacting to your emotional energy. They are now confronting their own, and that's the real breakthrough. Because in the end, it's not about getting them to chase you or do anything differently. It's about releasing the emotional charge, shifting the energy, and allowing them to engage with you on their own terms without feeling cornered or overwhelmed. So when you stop chasing, you don't just change the dynamics of the relationship, you change the way both of you interact with each other. You move away from a space of emotional chasing to one of emotional freedom. And that's when real connection can begin to form, based not on need or control, but on mutual respect and understanding. When you stop chasing someone, you create the opportunity for a more authentic connection to form. The truth is, when you're constantly seeking someone's attention or validation, the dynamic becomes skewed. It's no longer about mutual attraction or connection. It becomes about emotional dependence. You may think that your efforts to chase after them will bring them closer, but in reality, you're creating an emotional imbalance. The more you chase, the more you give off a signal of neediness, and that neediness becomes the very thing that pushes them away, especially if they're avoidant. Avoidants are particularly sensitive to emotional pressure. When they feel like they are being pursued, they often perceive it as an infringement on their autonomy. The more someone reaches out, the more they feel cornered, and they retreat further into themselves. But when you stop chasing, you take that pressure away, the space between you and the other person widens, and in that space something profound happens. They begin to feel the absence of your pursuit. The moment you stop chasing, they no longer have to worry about meeting your emotional expectations. They don't feel the need to pull away to preserve their own space. And in that absence of pressure, they may begin to reflect on the relationship differently. It's a natural human response. When something is taken away, you begin to notice it more. If they've become accustomed to your attention, your emotional availability, your chasing behavior, suddenly not receiving that can trigger a feeling of loss or even curiosity. They might begin to wonder, why aren't they chasing me anymore? What's changed? That is when their feelings previously buried under the layers of avoidance start to surface. This shift in energy doesn't happen overnight, but it is powerful when it does. The more you stop chasing, the more your emotional independence becomes apparent. You no longer need their validation or attention to feel secure. Instead, you cultivate your own sense of self-worth and emotional balance. This is not about playing a game or manipulating the other person. It's about reclaiming your own energy and learning to stand in your own truth. When you're no longer giving away your emotional power to chase someone else, you start to feel more grounded and authentic in your own experience. The key here is that by stopping the chase, you actually stop running after validation and start focusing on your own needs and desires. This subtle shift in focus causes you to become more self-sufficient emotionally. You begin to realize that your value isn't tied to their responses, their love, or their attention. You become more whole within yourself, and the self-sufficiency is magnetic. People are drawn to individuals who are secure in their own worth because it feels like stability. For the avoidant, this energy shift can be disorienting at first. They are used to you chasing them, and now that you've stopped, they may feel a sense of unease, but they also feel an underlying pull toward you. This tension is the space where change occurs. The avoidant, who might have been running from emotional intimacy, now has to face their own feelings. In that moment, they start to recognize their own fears or desires, and the dynamic between you two begins to shift in a way that feels more balanced. Stopping the chase doesn't just change the way they interact with you, it changes how you interact with yourself. It's a journey of self-discovery where you stop relying on external sources to validate your worth. And in doing so, you start to attract people who appreciate you for who you truly are, not for the emotional energy you expend to keep them around. This is the real power of stepping back. It's not about withdrawing affection or love. It's about giving space to both yourself and the other person to grow in a way that doesn't require emotional chasing. When you stop chasing, you create the space for real connection to emerge. In the end, the key to making an avoidant anxious without saying a word is not about manipulation or strategy. It's about changing the energy you bring into the dynamic. It's about choosing presence over pressure, power over neediness, and silence over pursuit. By shifting your own energy, focusing on your own value, and creating space for both you and the other person to grow, you disrupt the Familiar patterns of emotional push and pull. You stop chasing, stop validating your worth through someone else's approval, and in doing so, you create an environment where true connection can form. When you stop trying to control the other person's emotions, you allow them to confront their own feelings and desires, and in that moment of vulnerability, they are faced with a new choice, a choice to engage authentically, free from pressure. And the beauty of this is that over time, this shift can lead to a deeper connection, one built on mutual respect and understanding rather than emotional dependence or manipulation. Thank you for your time and attention today. I appreciate you being here, and I hope this message has sparked some new insights and reflections in your life. Remember that true connection starts with understanding and honoring your own energy. Keep that at the forefront of everything you do, and you'll be amazed at the shifts that unfold. Goodbye for now, and take care.